This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
.07 at WPSL, the talk of the Treasure Coast. Time now for Ask a Rabbi with Rabbi Shafir Loeb from Congregation Eitz, Chayim.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Loeb getting the mic in close here, and we'll see. Got that caught on my ear. The joy of a mask. Okay, and so we're trying all different kinds of things, and I already see that I made a serious mistake here, but that's okay. Welcome to the world. Instead of posting it on my page, I posted it on the congregation page. And so, yeah, we'll see if we can get this. Maybe we'll just do this and it'll be easier.
I don't think they'll mind.
I don't know. So both of my cameras want to shine on you, Yeah, there we go. Okay. We'll try this and we'll see. We'll see where things go. Yeah.
All right.
The joys of the camera, right? So, beautiful, beautiful Friday. Another beautiful Friday here in Florida. What we call Chamber of Commerce weather, the kind of weather that makes you want to be part of Florida. Definitely enjoyable. And Passover is done. Easter is done. We are now officially into spring/summer. Moving forward.
It's supposed to feel a little more like summer this weekend, too.
Yeah, it's supposed to get nice and toasty. So, yeah. And I'm sure that it will.
Oh, it has its means of getting very warm in the summer.
So, what I was going to talk about today actually has a little bit to do with the Passover story, because I think that it's a very rich, deep story, obviously part of the history, part of the formation of the Jewish people, the story of coming out of Egypt. And before I go to it, I'm actually going to step back to the story of Joseph being sold as a slave into Egypt. And a lot of people focus and say, the brothers sold him into slavery. That's not what the text says. It's very, very interesting. And I'm forgetting right now whether it's the Ishmaelites or the Midianites. They're both part of the story. What the brothers do is throw him into a pit. And they're actually trying to discuss, as they sit and eat bread, what they want to do with him and his dreams. So
they were jealous over a coat of many colors, right?
Whatever that coat was.
Okay.
The Hebrew doesn't say many colors. It says a special coat, tailored perhaps. Perhaps decorated, perhaps got a border on it or something. In any event, there's something obvious and special about that coat that he's wearing. So
none of the rest of them had one.
None of the rest of them had one. And, of course, the issue there, which is one of the issues that Scriptures deals with extensively, is does firstborn entitle you to things?
Ooh.
Because the ancient system was, and this actually plays into things like the plague of the death of the firstborn in Egypt. I mean, that's a clue that has a lot to do with what's going on. And sorry about that. One of the joys of technology, wires everywhere. But the story of the firstborn has to do with the tradition that the firstborn is given a double cut of everything, a double cut. And there's also, it's part of why America was formed. America was formed by second and third children in families, particularly sons, because only the eldest inherited. Right? Not everybody can be king of England or queen. It has to be one, and it's typically the eldest surviving child. And so the very least that the firstborn gets is a double cut of food. So they always have more food, so they're not as likely to be starving. They're going to develop better, stronger, smarter, etc., until they get a toxic bacteria or fungus in the wheat when the crops fail. Right, so that might have been associated with the death of the firstborn, because people often say, how could anything natural select the firstborn? Because as you're sitting around the table, it's not obvious. In fact, it's kind of an interesting piece, because if you read part of the story with Joseph when he's pretending to not be a Hebrew, when he's pretending to be Egyptian, which was very, very easy for him to do in front of the brothers, because you don't have face-to-face challenges. You've got makeup and a mask in front of Joseph, and he is speaking Egyptian to a translator who may or may, whether that translator knows that Joseph knows Hebrew doesn't even enter into the question. It's part of the facade and the magnificence, if you will, of being the vizier of Egypt. So he's speaking Egyptian to a translator who's translating it to the brothers. But one of the things that he does is that he assigns the portion according to the birth of his brothers. And the brothers are kind of like, how does he know who's who?
Oh, the story deepens a little bit.
The story,
yes.
There's a lot of interesting detail inside that story that if you don't know how to ferret that out, if you will, if you don't know how to dig it out of the story, you're going to miss those details. They're cultural details that anybody in the time when the story was committed to paper or to parchment or recited would have known and would have understood and would have said, oh yeah, of course. Just like kids today understand things that their parents and grandparents don't, because can move on. It's in fact understood, and you don't explain what a bottle of Starbucks is to people who know that it's coffee, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, but people who don't know can miss those details. But one of the things that I try to teach my students when I'm teaching them about scriptures and stuff like that is during the time when scriptures was hand copied, when copy was made from certified copy to certified copy to certified copy, you didn't stick in a lot of extra stuff because it took longer to write it. So everything that's in there is important. All of the superfluous stuff, the extra stuff, the unnecessary stuff got cut out over time and edited out of the story. So what's left is important. It tells us something more about the story if there's another couple of sentences. And so that's important, right? What's glossed over is something that's understood, and what's done in detail is because you need that detail to understand what's happening. So the giving out of the meals and the brothers looking at each other is one of the details in the story with Joseph and his brothers. And then later on, when Judah comes up and says, you can't not let us take Benjamin back, because our father will surely die if he loses both of Rachel's children, because he's already lost Joseph. And this gives Joseph a lot of information that he hasn't bothered to try to contact his father or his brothers for however many years he's in Egypt. And, it's probably 20 years, probably longer than he lived with his family that he's been in Egypt. And he's never tried to contact his father, who clearly had to have been a fairly big name in the local area. These are not the stories of poor shepherds, right? These are the stories of rich shepherds and herdsmen and its major family units. So that needs to be understood as well. And easily, Joseph could have sent a messenger, maybe not while he's a slave, but he certainly could once he's in Pharaoh's household. And he doesn't do anything to try to find. And there's this really amazing piece when Judah comes forward and tells him the story, that Joseph has died, and the only son remaining from his mother, who's the favorite of their father, Rachel, his favorite wife, that she had died and that she only has these two children, and the only one left to him is this one, and it's and Benjamin doesn't seem to be all that dynamic a character. Today we could look at it, and I'm sure that physicians could look at it and figure that maybe the baby had a little bit of hypoxia in the birth because the birth was labored and struggled and mom died in it and the baby's taken from her. But all of that going on, we don't know what that did to the development of Benjamin. But in any event, when all of this goes on, then Joseph screams, "Get out of here," in Egyptian to all of his people. A very common thing. If castles, palaces, complexes have tons and tons of ears. Those servants talk all the time, and to think that they don't is to be ignorant. So he yells at everybody, "Get out of here, get away, get out. Let me be with these people." He doesn't go into that detail, but it's basically, let me be with these people. And then he takes all of the showmanship away. And he turns to Judah and he says, "Does my father still live?" And of course, Judah is like, "Huh? What? Who?" It's not what he expected. He doesn't recognize Joseph at all, has no idea who he is or what's going on. They think that he's perished. They have no way of thinking that he's become vizier of Egypt. And one of the things that he says to them is, "Look at me, it is my mouth speaking to you." And the part that's not written down, in Hebrew. So he's not going through the translator. He's saying, "Look, I'm the one speaking. I know this language. May not have used it much, but I still know it." And that's part of the way that he identifies himself to them. And then all of the pieces, of course, start to make sense, and why he knows who's which brother. He recognizes his brothers completely. They have no way of recognizing him. It's not that they're stupid. He's wearing makeup. He doesn't look like himself. He's not speaking to them in their language. He's speaking to them in Egyptian, etc.
So there was no way that they would believe it, even if they were to know it at the moment.
It's incredible to them. It's got to penetrate that outer level of what they expect to hear or see. They don't expect this to be Joseph. They don't know the story, and they haven't read the book yet. They don't know the story. They can't begin to imagine that it's actually Joseph they're talking to. They are simply trying to tell a story of a man who is bereaved over the loss of his son and his favorite wife. Probably not an uncommon story of the time. But they're trying to jerk some tears out of this vizier and get some sympathy and hopefully get Benjamin freed up. I don't think they think he did that. They probably think he wasn't bright enough to have done that, and so they believe that something weird has happened, and they just can't explain what it is.
I bet they were surprised.
I'm gonna guess that they were, if we follow that part of the scripture story that the money and the cup are put in Benjamin's sack, into his packings. And maybe they do think, oh, he thought it was a pretty cup and he just grabbed it because he's a little bit simple-minded. Hard to say. We don't know all the details. We do know that the tribe of Benjamin is the smallest, or one of the smallest of the tribes. But it gives us Saul. So we have a king of Israel from there. And there are other Benjamites who figure later on in the stories. Getting over to the story of the Exodus, one of the things, again, that people like to say is that, Moses puts out the rod and the seas split, therefore it's the rod doing it. But if you read the text, and I know that I've talked about that previous weeks and previous episodes, that's not what the text says. The text says that the east wind blew, and it blew the water out. And living in Florida, living in through hurricanes, we have some recollection and understanding of water being blown off of shores and out of rivers and things like that to make them much more passable for short periods of time, which again makes one wonder about the numbers of scriptures. It is unlikely that it really is 2 million people walking across a reed sea, not a Red Sea, but a reed sea.
Reed Sea, yeah.
Yam Suf, not Yam Adom. They're two different seas. And it's humorous to hear people talk about Yam Adom because I hear that. I watch Israeli, a little bit of Israeli TV and things like that. There are wonderful clips of different pieces on YouTube and things like that you can actually watch, and they're subtitled so people who don't understand can see it. But there is a section there where they're talking about a discussion between Moses and the Israelites coming across the Red Sea, and of course they have tablets and iPads and all of those things because it's modern and it's a funny time thing that they're playing with there. The argument, what would it be like today is basically the underlying argument. What would it be like to try to get a group of people across the sea, and how would they challenge Moses and say this isn't real, and if God can't do this, then God can't be real. Right? Why does it take us 40 years to wander in the desert? We should be able to get there in 11 days or less. God should be able to go, and we're there. And of course, that's not the way that stories work.
Maps hadn't been perfected yet.
No, they're amazingly accurate, some of the ancient maps that we have. It's surprising how accurate some of those things are. Some of them, not at all. Others, very good.
I've seen some pretty impressive maps of the world that showed the continents pretty much the way they still appear on maps today.
Yeah. Some very, very ancient
Real
maps.
Good navigation systems back then.
Much better than we like to think when we tell the story of Columbus. Columbus he followed maps.
Yeah.
He was looking for a cut through that would get through to the other side. He did not think the earth was flat. Much bigger details involved in that. He's looking for a cheap route to the east because at that time it was a combination of sea and land to get across, and goods were very expensive. The wonderful spices and teas and things coming out of the east, much more difficult because they had to come across this water/land caravan to get into Europe. England is, if you will, the far end of the world coming from the east, as opposed to the land on which the sun never sets. Different times, different power structures. So there's a value in trying to be able to reach the east cheaply. And that's what Columbus was looking for. On the way, he could find some other things and wrench some gold and kill a few natives, and I'm making light of a very not pretty story. I recognize that. Much more to those stories as well, and there was in biblical days as well. So when we look at the story of coming out of Egypt, it's amazing to me how many people hear the stories but never read them, and never read them to any depth. You miss so much of what's going on, like that piece of it. The wind blows the water out. So why does Moses have a rod? Because everybody's staring at the encroaching Egyptians. They've got war horses and chariots. They're whooping it up. They're making a lot of noise. They are doing what armies did in those days, which was to intimidate people. They're trying to scare them into immobility, and they're sitting there against this marsh sea, this sea of reeds. They can't cross. They can't take the animals and the carts and all of the stuff across the reed sea because it gets bogged down. And then the winds come and blow the water out, and then you can ride across.
Wow.
An interesting piece of the story. Combination perhaps of one of those supermoons that changes the tide dramatically, a little bit of a storm, or a big storm. We don't know how long they had, as I like to tell people, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, Wall Street Journal, none of those things were there.
It's so amazing now, though, that we can see all these things as they happen from all over the world.
It is amazing. And we get, I know that in Ask a Lawyer, Stuart was talking about the case going on right now and all the video that's been shot of that incident. Today, if something happens nearby people, there's 5 million, and of course I'm exaggerating the number, but there's this huge number of people who pop up their phones and take a video. Yeah. Look at what we're doing right now. We're videoing. We're
How many cameras do we have in here?
Yeah, well,
you brought some too.
I've got my phone and my tablet, and I can see 2 cameras on me, and there's 1 camera on you, and then there's the little ones, the tiny ones that are floating around.
Yeah, there's even some security cameras in here.
Yeah, there is that, yes.
But we actually video a lot of shows with some of the cameras in the studio, like this one right here.
That's this one right here. Hi, I can say hi to the big camera.
Yeah, because the big camera is the YouTube show that goes to YouTube, and what you're doing over on your side, you're doing your Facebook.
Right, I'm doing Facebook onto the temple and onto my personal site.
So if folks had a question for you, they could type it right into the chat room.
And they do that. As a matter of fact, hi Sharon from Tucson, and hi Jay locally.
Wow.
There are people that I see and people that I don't necessarily. And Eric is watching from Canada. Right. So we are international just on my little. These devices are amazing. They're absolutely amazing at what they can and cannot do.
Just a few years ago, we had never even yet dreamed that we'd be able to do this.
No. One of my favorite, not cartoons, but jokes, memes, I guess is the right word for it, is of a group of teenagers standing at a payphone, and the guy is holding the receiver of the phone up as if to take a selfie of himself and the little group with him.
Yeah.
Those things that kids do today, about which they have no idea. No idea.
Like the analog clock?
Like the analog. Well, today we still have to teach children how to read an analog clock. It's important because there are references that they would lose if they don't know how to tell time. Yeah. I'm keenly aware of that from my flying experience because we report traffic and we report things according to 2 o'clock, 10 o'clock.
As far as location from your viewpoint.
Right. And there's the popular phrase, check your 6. That means check behind you, 6 o'clock. Okay. So if you're sitting in the middle of a clock and straight ahead is 12.
Right.
And to your right and your left are 3 and 9, and your back is your 6. That's where the phrase check your 6 comes from. It means 6 o'clock. To your position. Keep an eye on what's happening behind you. Important when you're doing traffic, certainly when you're driving. You need to check your 6.
Yeah, if they're following too close, you can't slam on your brakes too quickly, or else they'll run right into you.
So and you'll
check your 6.
And you'll discover how not tankish your car can be. They crumple easily these days, and that's just part of life. So we need to keep some of these things even when they kind of become outdated. And we're seeing a lot of technological waves happening throughout. I was listening yesterday to a video that was talking about strategic planning in corporations, strategic management it's called, and the decisions that managers and leaders and owners of companies have to make to stay strong. And it talked about the inability of Kodak to recognize that film, which they had, of course, pioneered a lot of products and revolutionized the film industry and had the bulk of their business on. Kodak cameras were not the bread and butter of the company. There were a few Kodak cameras. The bulk of their money was in film and its production accessories. So, of course, as digital filming is coming on, they did not make the technological jump to make digital devices in order to capture the images. Instead, they tried to shift into cameras and accessories for your phone to take pictures, because they were still trying to work a way to keep their bread and butter, their film, part of their industry working, and that was a bad decision. That's why it's included in that particular video.
We've seen changes in business before because of technology. Look at the drive-in theaters all disappeared with the VHS tape.
Because it became easier to watch.
Right. You could
at
bring
home.
it home, yeah.
You didn't have to go to the drive-in where you shared the film with the mosquitoes who knew exactly how to get in around the speaker. And
in spite of that little spiral thing that repels mosquitoes at the drive-in.
Yeah, which basically attracts them all. Yeah.
A lot of people don't remember those, but yeah, it does. It did attract them.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's many things like that have gone the way. There was a shopping center in Tucson right near my house that had been a drive-in. Why? Because it was nice cleared land. It was easy for the shopping center to move in. Yeah. There had been a drive-in there, I am told, from all of the neighbors that we had then and other friends who knew that drive-in, because I only knew it as a shopping center. Things change.
Oh, yeah. Remember the rotary dial phones?
Rotary dial phones.
I got one off a swap shop one time years ago. Well, the kids were still growing up, and I thought, you want to use a phone? Use this. They went crazy over that because they didn't know how to use it.
The kids today do not. They're looking, where are the buttons to push?
Where's the screen?
Where's the screen? All those those early screens that came on some devices. Oh. Or you look at the early Blackberries. Yeah. Things that had, if you will, mechanical keyboards as opposed to the digital ones that kids can run with their thumbs and adults are not so agile at, because we didn't grow up doing those motions, right. And so we're not used to it.
Watch the kids, though. They fly
they
through
can
it,
fly through. They can type stuff faster than you can imagine. Another technological paradigm shift, for lack of a better word, when the watches went crystal.
Oh, yeah, quartz.
And the gem movements in Europe, which, by the way, the Arabs brought to Europe, something most people don't realize. The Swiss watch movement did not want to embrace the electronic technology, saying, it's not very accurate, it's not going to really fly. But, of course, there are always great technological advances.
Oh, yeah.
There are always breakthroughs. It's what breakthrough engineering is all about. It's finding those gaps that bring the new technology into common use. And those always happen. But the people who have their bread and butter in the older technologies find it hard to make those shifts and those jumps and stay ahead of the curve.
Well, I bet they have to market everything to fit their new structure. It's hard to do.
It's not easy for a company to radically re-envision itself and embrace new technology. And if you embrace the wrong aspect of it, then you lose anyway. That's a very difficult thing. And if there's anything that's happening in technology today, it's that our technology is changing faster and faster and faster. And so it is very, very important. It's hard for people to embrace new technology. It's one of the reasons why. There was something I was reading, I take that back. It was my husband who was reading it, that said that something like 30% of those over 70 do not have smartphones. That's a huge chunk of the population. And that has to do with the challenge of, just as the kids don't know how to use a rotary dial.
I've heard it. I like my flip phone.
Yeah. Right. And, of course, the smartphone does bring this. My phone sitting in front of me, videoing me right now, has more horsepower, if you will, than the IBM 360 that was the up-and-coming big deal in computers and took a building much larger than the studio. Not a building, a room much larger than this studio.
The average Microsoft 10 PC has more technology in it than the Apollo astronauts had on their ship.
It's It's amazing what we were able to do. Sometimes we have these breakthroughs that are ahead of their time. The SR-71 was an airplane that was built before the technology was really ready for that kind of an airplane. And they really had to work extra hard because they didn't have the composites and the kind of sealing and the materials that can handle the very high altitudes and being down on the ground. They
Velocity,
leaked. Well, it's also the leaking because the parts change depending on the temperatures and the pressures. And so the Blackbird was famous for leaking all over the place because to make it fly right at altitude, it didn't sit right on the ground. And that was a function of the technology at the time when the plane was designed and built. We don't think of those things very often. We think of technology, kids today look at it as if it has always been there, because for them, it has. They have grown up in a very different world than you and I grew up, and every so many years we have a new generation that has a totally different experience.
And a totally different outlook on everything.
And a totally different outlook on everything. And we are that blend. So, yeah.
We were once at that point in our own development, but now we've moved on, and we're looking back at these new young adults that are coming into the situation. They're growing up, they're graduating from everywhere, and they're doing things we never dreamed of.
That's true. You look even at this little bit of technology that I've got here that's got fuzzy things on the little
the microphone,
the foam cover to take the shock audio out of the video that it's recording. I look at this now and I don't even want to think about how much this would have cost once upon a time. This isn't, I never noticed this until just now. This has a little tag on it and it's got a picture of a smartphone on it.
Oh my. Now, does that clip onto the wire somewhere and contain it, or? It's
got the phone jack here, and it's got a little thing that shows microphone. So I guess to make sure you plug the right ends of the wire in the right place. I think they only fit one way, but that's an ohm and impedance thing.
Yeah.
She said out of distant ancient.
Ancient technology like original ham radio and Ohm's law, E equals I over R.
I vaguely remember that.
Okay, I was going to say I shouldn't even know it, but I remember it. It was important.
There are all kinds of Ohm's law named for ohm. That's how some of these things have these weird names. And so language, let's get back into it.
Yeah.
Come back around. Language is not something that is static or dead. And it's one of the interesting things. I had an insight into it. I learned German from my mother, who was from Vienna. But she came to the U.S. in the late 30s. She was one of the last people to make it out of Vienna, right before, literally a month before they sealed the borders and didn't let people out.
We had a kid rooming with us years ago from Austria, and his sister would come over to visit, and we'd listen to them talk to each other, and we could understand some of what they were saying. There was like a mixture of English and German.
And that's true. And there's a big influence throughout the world of English backwashing into other languages. The other thing that I wanted to say about that, so I learned German from my mother, which of course did not include television, because television was invented not in my lifetime, but not all that much before it. Right. It certainly wasn't around in the 30s commonly. I'm not sure exactly when it came in. I know that early TVs were these little tiny screens in this great big box with 5 million tubes. I have a vague memory as a child of my father taking tubes to the tube tester at the drugstore. And one time we had to call in the TV repairman because I don't think he put the tubes back the way they were supposed to have been, because he was not an electrical engineering tube kind of person. He was trying to take out a couple of tubes, test them, and come back. And that was the old days when you did that with tube TVs. before transistors.
Yeah.
And you found the bad tube, you bought a replacement, and then you popped it back in if you were savvy enough to know how to do that. He was trying to be that kind of savvy and not that proficient.
I made a savvy discovery with the old television when I was a kid. I had accidentally had something that had batteries in it, and the batteries died, and I didn't think anything of it. I set it on top of the TV and walked away from it. And what I didn't realize, but I soon discovered, that those TVs had tubes in them, and there was a lot of heat generated.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes that heat would recharge the little batteries that would put in our transistor radios, such back then. But today, you've got wireless battery chargers.
Yeah.
I still can't figure out how that works, but that's amazing. It's all amazing now.
Electricity's kind of amazing.
Well, yeah, it was invented a long time ago, but there's still things we're learning about it every day.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And we can get it from solar panels and things like that.
Now, here's an interesting piece for any electrical folks that we've got that are listening. Check and read the description of the ark that's in scriptures, of the gold covering the acacia inside and out. And you kind of go, I think we have capacitors and transistors going on. And
I've heard stories of things that appear to be some kind of battery that were found in the pyramids.
There's definitely some battery kind of thing. So we had, who knows exactly what technology was, and some of that I'm sure was discovered by accident. There's the story of the person grabbing a hold of the ark and dying, and that probably is an electrical shock from the energy stored.
Or it could be radiation.
I don't think it was radiation.
No.
I'm pretty
You're talking
sure
about the Ark of the Covenant?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was, because radiation doesn't kill you instantly typically.
Oh, that's right.
But electricity will.
Good point. Yes, it will.
And I can say that as somebody who once grabbed hold of, my brother at one time sold ice cream when I was a little kid and he was in high school. And there was a short in the 220 line that plugged
220, my.
Yeah, we still got 220 in the house.
Yeah.
But there was a short in that cable that plugged it into the house, and as I grabbed the ice cream tuck standing in a puddle of water because it had rained, it was the perfect storm, and I could not let go. I was frozen in because of the electricity coursing through me.
Wow.
My father of blessed memory had the good presence of mind to throw a blanket on me and wrench me clear of it. And who knows? Maybe
we're
that's
lucky
part
you're
of
still with us.
That's probably part of why I'm crazy. Who knows? Who knows what it fried? I know I screamed, and the doctor actually at the time that checked me out afterwards said that my screaming is what kept me breathing.
Oh.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't think to scream if I was being electrocuted.
I
What
think
do I
I was
do?
just, I was startled, and I was terrified that I couldn't let go.
Because I remember grabbing a wire. We'd try to touch a wire to see if we could handle it. It couldn't let go because your muscles all lock up.
Lock up.
Yeah.
Which is, your breathing can lock up too.
Ooh. And your heart could stop.
Yeah,
It goes through.
lots of good things can happen to you, not good. So some of those things read differently when we have a technological understanding of today and look back at it. We might be surprised at how much technology they had and had figured out in some ways or another. The biggest thing that they hadn't done was motorized travel, of course.
Right.
That had not yet happened. And so human labor is much more critical, and what society does was dependent on that. But reading through the stories, you have to read them carefully because we have picked up these versions of them, if you will,
That were rewritten by people
who had an agenda, whether conscious or not.
and they didn't have a reality as far as the way it was really going on at the time, because people change over the years.
And we see interesting vignettes in scripture stories of things. For example, when Joseph is named vizier, he is given a necklace by Pharaoh to indicate his station. That was only done at a certain period of Egyptian history.
Ooh.
And it was not common at the time when scriptures is written down. And so scholars use that and look at it and say, okay, this story dates from that period.
Okay.
And people knew enough to keep that detail in the story. It didn't get dropped. It didn't get edited out. which is an interesting piece unto itself. So some of these stories that travel through time pick up their pieces. Other things get amended and modified as they get written down.
Right.
Because people need the bridges. An example of that, and I'm thinking of Christian scriptures right now, which is one of the ways that we date books as to when they're written. For example, in the book of John, the Gospel of John.
Oh, the Gospel of John, okay.
The Gospel of John, there's a reference in there of a story of Jesus at the Sea of Galilee, Yam Kinneret, and there's a note put on it which says, which is the Sea of Tiberias. Wow. And so it's not going to get called the Sea of Tiberias until after Tiberius is victorious enough to have earned the Roman honor of having a lake or sea named for him. It's one of the ways that we date scriptures is by the names of the locations, by the names of the people that are referenced. We can tell that something is not written in its time, but in fact written later, and that some of these footnotes that are part of the story, part of the text, are needed by the people who are reading the story or hearing the story. And it does matter. People often say, well, ancients were not literate. Then why do we have in the book of Deuteronomy, write this on the doorposts of your house?
Ooh.
If people don't know how to read and write, why would you have an instruction that says, write this?
Somebody had to know how to write because history was written.
Well, scriptures originally were repeated.
Okay.
We have, again, stories, the purchase of the cave of Machpelah by Abraham when Sarah dies. He's looking for a gravesite. Very often, wealthier families would lay their deceased in a cave to rot. Right? It was the form of burial. And when Abraham goes to buy, he's selected what he wants, and he arranges to meet with the owner of that cave in the gates of the city. And you have to understand the gates of the city are not just a little swing wrought iron gate that opens and closes. It's in fact the courtyard, the big courtyard just inside the gate. It's the public venue, if you will. And you have this wonderful exchange between Abraham and the owner, the Hittite that owns the cave, the transfer of deed, and it's done in front of many people so that everybody knows, oh yeah, he sold the cave to him. That's the way deeds were transferred before writing. So there's not much writing going on in Abraham's day. Most of the news is oral. Another way that we know that is when Abraham is coming back from having had the incident with Isaac, where he almost sacrifices his son. As he's coming down off the mountain, it says that the news was brought to Abraham of his brother and the children born to him. So family news, it's not like Abraham leaves and never has any contact with his family. That's not true. Messages and people go back and forth. And trading is ongoing, and messages travel along the trade routes.
And little adjustments are made in doctrine and the stories the way they're told.
Of course.
To try to adjust to the technology of the day, I guess.
Yeah. Even today, people don't hear everything that's transmitted. They don't hear everything that's said. How often do you say, could you say that again? Please repeat that.
Yeah.
What did you say? I missed part of that. The signal dropped. There's all kinds of ways that we clue that. We never get the whole signal. Ever. We fill in the gaps. And I used that understanding when I was teaching people to fly. Because we hear most of the time what we expect to hear. We guess ahead what somebody's going to say and very often react to that instead of actually listening to what they say.
Wow.
And so one of the things that I used to do with my flight students to make learning how to hear on the radio, because our voices are slightly different on the radio, I would go through all of the typical lines that you're going to exchange. I would have a piece of a pretend runway in the hangar, and my student would have to walk the flight path and give me all of the call signs, and I'd be the tower responding to them and giving them instructions, and they had to be able to do it walking the flight path on the ground before we got in the airplane, so that when we listened to it on our headsets and heard the radio or listened to it in speakers, and
You'd kind of know what to expect.
you know what to expect, and so you can hear it.
Okay.
If you don't, the words are really quite foreign, and they're harder to take in.
I've worn the headsets in a small airplane before, also on a blimp ride I took.
Oh, you're luckier than I am. I never got a blimp ride.
Oh, it's the smoothest, most comfortable.
I bet it is.
It was a windy day too. And I
But
just
nothing
couldn't-
moves quick in a blimp.
Oh no, and it was just nice and smooth. The ride was awesome.
Media very often can get blimp rides, big buyers
That's
of
how I
tires.
got it.
Yeah.
MetLife, as a
Yeah.
matter of fact.
Yeah, people who work for those companies, it's not so easy to get the blimp rides.
No. And
She
but-
said, having once worked for Goodyear.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
They have much larger blimps. This was a
Yeah, the little
a little
MetLife is
itty
the
bitty
little thing.
MetLife. Yeah, it's like a little minivan inside.
It's surprising what can float.
Yeah. But they put weights. They have weights on the bottom of it. They can add weights or take weights away as the passengers get in and out. So it just barely floats, and then the props pull it up, and down, and everywhere. Yeah, everywhere you go.
They want it to be pretty much not weightless as it's floating.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the best.
Yep. And it is a careful balance and calculation.
Ah.
Anyway, yeah, life is interesting. Wonderful technology. So life is changing. Kids today have all of this, kids, adults, and it's harder for older generations to adopt and get used to, whereas the kids just fly through it and they're used to it.
I noticed that a lot of folks would get help with computer problems and questions by asking a young child. Because there were two groups of people that seemed to be able to be helpful with computers. Young folks, extremely young, and old folks who have a lot of time to learn all this stuff.
You do have to learn it.
Yeah.
The joke when VCRs came out was, if you don't know how to program it, ask a child, because
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
you
Oh, yeah.
learn by what you want and need.
That's how I learned to understand tablets. Because
By having to.
Windows 10 came out, and you could touch the screen like a tablet, and it was a laptop.
Yeah.
And I asked my granddaughter, I said, and I was surprised. I took this chance because I know how kids are. And I said, why do the PC people not like the tablet so much? And she said, they're just not used to, the Windows 10. They didn't like Windows 10. It's too much like a tablet to some people.
It's a change. It's a
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. And I thought, how profound. She was, 6 years old when she answered that question for me, and I understood her.
Yeah, and because they're looking for apps and things like that.
Yeah.
Which
yeah.
is different from the way that those of us who started with the floppies, remember those
Oh, my.
8-inch floppies?
Oh, the big ones.
The
yeah.
big, and they
Yeah.
really were
Yeah.
floppy. They flopped
That's why they
all
call
over.
them floppy.
That's why they called them
And then the
floppies, yeah.
smaller, 4.5-inch discs. Those came along.
Well, first there were the big floppies, then there were the small floppies.
Yeah, the Windows 3.1.
Then there were the little cartridge floppies, and then
Oh, and today the USB drives.
the USB drives. The
Oh,
USBs
my.
hold more
Yeah.
today than the entire computer had on my desk when.
I think my first computer had a 20 meg hard drive, and
Yeah.
it was about the size of
And now
a
you can
bread
make,
box.
and now you probably couldn't even hold one file on it.
No. And
Files are much bigger than that.
pictures and especially videos.
Oh my gosh, videos are huge. Videos are huge. We are inundating the Internet of Things.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff talks to each other. We've got so many security cameras today. I like to warn students and I think some of them get it, some don't, that you are on camera somewhere if you are outside your house, and you probably are on one even in your house.
Well, if you have a smartphone or a smart car, your location is being verified by these sentinels that are out there, by people who are geomining.
Yeah.
And it's verifying location. Every time I drive past Amazon Prime trucks, I see this geomining starts happening in my phone, and I'm collecting a lot of crypto coins for it. And I thought, wow, this is kind of something better to do than sit around and waiting on legislation to come around and straighten out all the other crypto problems we're having. But here we are in that time when it's time to do all this.
Yeah, and people are monetizing all kinds of different things, as you just mentioned, that people never thought about monetizing way back when.
Selling data, getting paid to track people. Ooh, that's scary.
Well, and track people not so much in a personal personal way as much as a sociological print, if you will.
And the data location is what they're actually paying for now. Wow. And all this time we thought they were taking it for free.
And some of it they are.
Oh, of course.
Big time. We have the Internet of Things. If you've got a smart, and most people do, smart appliances in your home.
Right.
If you've got Alexa or
Google, turn off the lights.
Yeah. Yeah, any of those things. Whenever you do that, a little bit of information goes. And models are being built about what people like and don't like. And there are companies that use that information in their marketing to bring it back around. So we've got a lot of technology going on. We've got a lot of misunderstanding going around.
A lot of confusion,
people don't
too.
understand. Lots of confusion. Lots of opportunities for confusion. And I watch things like people getting confused by phishing stuff and all of this. The spam that's out there is just over the top. You do have to be alert and mindful of those things and not just click everything that says click here.
No, click bait is a bait to get you to click because they want to do something to your computer that you don't need them to do.
Right. And sometimes they just want to use your computer.
Now that's
some of that data mining kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because the cloud is not a cloud, it's a group of servers netted together so that you have this amazing storage space.
Your Google can verify your location through the Sentinel devices, but if you've already got GPS, it verifies, it witnesses the location.
Yeah.
So there's money to be made out there in that area, folks.
That was one of the things that helped me talk my husband into a smartphone, was the phone's ability that you could say, Siri, where am I?
Yeah.
Right. And if you were in the middle of nowhere in God's country, Utah,
which is way out there somewhere,
not many towers, but it came back and it said, "Oh, you're here." So, yeah, we're getting close on time. I hear the music in the background there.
Wow.
So let me remind everybody that we have services at 7:30 on Fridays, and hopefully everybody is getting a vaccine. And we're working through that. Please check out our website, www.eitzchayim.org. This is Rabbi Shafir Loeb. Please contact the radio station if you'd like to sponsor me.
Then this is WPSL Port St. Lucie.